Hi, I'm Ben, one of the content strategists at Spark Interact. Today, I'll be going over Entity SEO, specifically what it is and why it's important. Now, this isn't a video for SEO specialists. This is an entry-level explanation for end users, the content writers, the business owners. This is going to help you understand what your SEO team is talking about when they make Entity SEO recommendations. So to start, what is an entity? Well, you kind of already know. Everyone does. We just don't use the phrase entity to describe it outside of SEO. To explain what an entity is, I'm going to build a definition with 3 layers of complexity. And we're going to start off very basic with layer 1. An entity is a thing. What do I mean by that? If you look at this sentence, Ben goes to Central Station, there are 2 things. Ben, a person, and Central Station, a location. That is how we categorize those 2 things. And when that categorization is done by a program or search engine, those things are known as entities. This approach is not new. This article here is from 2012, and it's often pointed to as the start of when Google began pushing for entity search over keyword search. And the way Google has been defining entities or things is by building a knowledge graph. What is a knowledge graph? Well, it's a record of all of the connections between different things. Right now, I'm showing an example of Elvis Presley. There are many things that relate to Elvis Presley, like the date, 16th of August 1977. On its own, that's a single day in history. When connected to Elvis, it's his birthday. With that connection made, a fact has been created, and we now know a little bit more about Elvis Presley as an entity. Which brings us to layer 2. An entity is a thing with meaning. What a knowledge graph is really mapping is context. Consider the number 38. Alone, it could refer to pretty much anything. Put a dollar sign in front of it, it's now a price. Add Kipak Street, it's now an address. In everyday language, the way we define things is often by their relation to other things. Entities are trying to capture this process. This makes them very different to keywords. Keywords are exact matches to what's been said or typed. So, for example, Spark Interact is an entity. It's a company and it has connections to people, services, projects, lots of things. On the other hand, the number 1 Sydney web design, digital marketing, and branding agency is not an entity. That's just a phrase. And sure, it's full of the classic SEO terms we love to put in our content, but it's not a thing. It's, hopefully, just a small part of what Spark Interact means as an entity. A good way to see this difference is through Wikipedia, because Wikipedia is basically a library of entities. It is just pages about things. Here you can see what happens if you search, "How do birds fly?" The results don't really answer my question, but it's not trying to answer it. It's returning a list of things that are relevant. A V formation is the way some birds fly. The dodo is notable because it's a bird that can't fly. It's not what I was asking now, but maybe down the line it could have been the answer to my next question, which is something that's useful for layer 3. An entity is a thing with meaning for machines. The reason entities exist at all is because it's so hard to make a machine understand how people think, write, and speak. Now, you may have heard of natural language processing, thanks to the blow up of AI. NLP itself is the computation required to understand human speech. Part of its goal is to understand context, which is quite hard. To give a demonstration, if you searched White House, you probably want to know about American politics. If you searched White House paint, you probably want to know about DIY products. But even then, it's not 100% certain. Maybe you did mean the paint used on the White House in Washington, D.C. That uncertainty makes it difficult for machines to interpret our meaning, and it's why pure keyword search and analysis starts to fall behind. Taken all together, this is how entities can look in practice. This image here you're looking at is taken from Google's own NLP API, which you can go and play around with yourself. It shows quite clearly how it breaks down what you write into different categories and entities. And really, that's as far as we need to go for defining an entity before it gets too technical. But why are we talking about entities now? Honestly, the short answer is the surge in conversation around AI. But there are also a lot of benefits that end users should know about with entity SEO. To start with, entity SEO is the more proactive approach of SEO approaches. If we go back to that 2012 article, we can see the whole point of entity search laid out. It's about answering the questions that users haven't asked yet. When I asked how birds fly, I didn't ask about birds that can't fly, like the dodo, but the information was still welcomed. It was relevant to what I was interested in. When your content is focused on keyword matching, you're really just chasing what people last searched. You're always one step behind of what your audience is looking for. But when your content matches a whole topic of interest, you're creating something more resilient. These topics, by the way, include more and more interest as time goes on. The latest figures say there are over 8 billion searchable entities now. This number is probably going to keep growing as well, which means new connections between new things are made all the time. Consider social media as an entity. At first, when you spoke about social media, you just meant Facebook. Then that grew to include Twitter, then Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. Then Twitter was out and X was in. Topics evolve. So when you optimize content for entities, you're making sure your content remains useful. Ultimately, what entity SEO gives back is flexibility in your content. You don't need to stuff your pages full of keywords. You don't need to include misspelt words to capture searches. You can talk about umbrellas and be confident that you'll capture searches for parasols as well. Instead, entity SEO is concerned with being comprehensive, useful, and relevant. Or, to use the SEO term, demonstrating topical authority. And now that you understand these kind of basics of entities and how we got to this point, you can be part of this conversation with your SEO team about improving your topical authority. And you can start developing a more resilient strategy for your own content. And that's what I'll leave you with today. Thanks for your time, and I hope you had a great day. Thank you.